let's get on with it, shall we? And I'll shuffle my cards and see what the first question is. Let's see. Oh, it just so happens that the first question is from one of our sponsors. Happy little coincidence. So can I ask Jim MacDonald from Architecture and Design Scotland to outline his first idea?
The idea I have for you, hopefully, is a straightforward link between public service delivery and our small towns in Scotland. It's called Learning Towns, and there's a clue in there. The basic idea is that we have a lot of town centres across Scotland, across Britain, whose future is under threat, in question. Places that have seen better days. But all of those places have a wealth of assets, in terms of the buildings, the folk memory, the heritage, all of that. But perhaps most importantly, in terms of the people and their aspirations. Most of those small towns also have schools, and traditionally they've been looked at as the fulcrum of those places. But again, as public service looks to squeeze every single penny and every single pound harder and harder, fewer and fewer of those towns can hold on to their schools, and that's a problem, not just for the schools and the people who use them. So the basic idea is working with some local authority partners to look at different ways of providing learning environments using the assets of the town centres in question. Those assets being, remember, the people as well as the buildings. So the basic idea is instead of building a new school on the edge of that town or on the edge of a different town and involving all the travel and all the disruption and all the sense of failure in the town that you leave behind, look at the buildings, look at the people, get them all in and get them doing two key things: working together and participating in the design of a learning town. And a learning town isn't just about this high school or the primary school. It's about what people learn forever. So from infants through school-age children into adults and beyond, if there is such a thing. So looking at how we can use the buildings that are there differently to provide a range of services. Learning Towns started out with looking at schools, but as we've talked to local authority partners across the country, it's looked at much more than just that. So it's actually an opportunity to bring together a whole range of services, to rethink the way we deliver services out with the traditional boundaries of education, health, social welfare, etc. So the idea is quite simple. Get people working early on an idea, get them working together, and through that come up with better ideas of making our public services contribute more directly to the people who need them and in a way which serves the towns that require them. Thank you.
Jim, a really good question to start with. So, get together early and work together. Let's turn it over to our ideas testers. I think ladies first. Lesley?
Well, I mean, you know, great on the face of it, but what I'm interested in is where this goes. And I actually wrote a column, strangely, in the Scotsman, which is nice to see the Herald around in Edinburgh this morning, and the Scotsman on Monday, which was talking just about this dilemma that's currently facing a lot of schools in remote rural areas, but it's no different really in towns. I mean, there's just there's an issue kind of contraction everywhere. But what I'm wondering about is, I mean, Scotland has the largest councils in Europe. Where you're walking to is where I'd like to walk to, which is to start thinking about municipal government. Now, I'm sure that's not where you plan to walk, because it strikes me that, you know, the units of councils that we've got at the moment, notwithstanding my colleague here who will not agree, are too large to basically empower the communities in the units where they actually live, and they actually live in communities roughly the borough or parish town size that we used to have. So is that where you're going with this, Jim? Are you a bit of a kind of revolutionary, eh?
I'd like to think so, but no, that's...
No, you're not, are you?
That's not where we're going. It's turning it around and not looking at the structure of government to be the determining factor in delivering services. It's looking at the communities that consume and rely on those services to direct all of that, be they at the very small rural scale or indeed the city region scale.
Okay, so supposing they decide, which they might well do, they want to keep every crappy old building in their town open and they want money for it, you know, a la restoration. When you were talking about rum earlier, I was chairing a task force with Mike Russell about the future of rum, and like many of these kind of remote areas, they're sitting with a big white elephant at the middle of it. In this case, Kinloch Castle. It actually came second in the programme restoration. And second's a bad place to be, because you don't get the money, but you do get Prince Charles' undying interest. And that's a bad combo, you know, because you can't do anything with it, because Prince Charles and his regeneration fund are watching and want the best standard of free repair, which basically means stalemate. So I'm in this town, I want everything to stay open. Can you fix it for me, Jim?
I can try, but it's not just about those people that want one or two narrow objectives. The whole key of this is collaborating and participating across the community. So you can draw out those discussions in a way which serves everybody's interest, because clearly you can't give everybody what they want all the time.
But that's what I mean. Do you therefore have a budget? And this is what I mean. You need to get to a stage where a community has been given certain power to say, we've got, you know, you've got this amount of money to play with, because unless you give people a budget or a target or a limit, they're just going to scan everything and say, well, we'd like to keep everything open.
Well, the clever bit...
I'm going to stop you both there for a second. That's a really good opening. I just want to bring in Ian before we continue that discussion. Ian.
Nothing like a nice simple starting question, is it, Jess? I really like this idea, and in fact, perhaps being simple local authority background, I think of it at a more lowly level, and just wait to this after the next slot as to whether or not you decide that the region should be big or small. Listen to my bit on that. I think if you look at any of our communities, there are enormous range of resources. We all tend to say, oh, we haven't got enough of this, we haven't got enough of that. And I can think of countless examples in towns where, by just getting people to talk to each other, they become aware of the actual capacity in settlements, but both in terms of built assets that they can share, make better use of, and in terms of skill sets. And I took part in a little scheme, you were aiming this at education, called Living Streets about 2-3 years ago, which is actually to try and engage school kids in looking at and assessing high streets and town centres, and it was really starting at primary school level and working through. The attraction to me was that when I look at my wife's former primary school, there were allotments within it that they used to use to grow crops and to learn, as the question raised earlier about sort of other life skills. And that site is now completely derelict, and the school looks like Fort Knox. There's sort of 6-foot fence with barbed wire tops, and you think, as a resource that we're bringing our kids up in, is that the right kind of approach? That we fence them off, we protect them from everything conceivable, and we put them in a car and we drive them home, and they never actually kind of interact with the rest of society for years to come. And I actually think that's quite dangerous, because my experience of that in all walks of life is that it leads to people to kind of polarise views and fears, and that kind of gets out of hand. So I think looking at the town as a resource as a whole, and getting people at all ages to utilise those resources and to interact with those as they really work is really helpful. I think it advises designers, how is the space really working now, as opposed to how they might envisage it. I suppose the downside is that I can imagine the Elfin safety guys having a real nightmare here. We probably need to work that through. And just a parting shot, Greenlaw Town Hall came not second, but I think 6th, and has actually been restored with community engagement, with a council backing, with Historic Scotland, with a whole host of others, including local landowners, piling in to make it work. It took a long time to get there, but that commitment happened. And that programme was helpful, but it wasn't the key thing.
Thank you. Okay, so that was a pretty good opening start. We have already maybe a theme about empowerment, yes, but can that be done with existing structures, or do we have to look at structures, or is it about other things? I'll throw a line to somebody who might be from Health and Safety Executive to tell us what their view might be about some of these ideas, or I can let Jim and Lesley continue that discussion that I rudely cut off that we're having. Anybody from the audience feel strongly want to chip in at this point? Otherwise, I'll go back to Jim and Lesley for a second. Yes, sir. Could you say who you are before you have your question, please?
Graham Bell, and of course it was Prince Charles who opened the town hall in Greenlaw.
Yep. Duke of something, actually.
Duke of Rothesay.
Thank you. I nearly said Roxburgh, that's right.
I think this is a fantastic idea, but we've already hit on, and you've said health and safety, but there are other issues around this. The major obstacle to this, because at the end of the day this is actually about people, not buildings. The buildings are simply something that is around the people, and it's the people who would or wouldn't make this work. I live in a small town, 2,000 people. We campaigned for years to get modern languages taught in the school. This is impenetrable and impossible because of all the regulations about who can or can't go into a school, let alone whether you've got to cross a 6-foot-high fence with barbed wire on top. And I understand why that happens. My son was in primary 1 at the time of Dunblane. I would hate that to have happened to anybody I knew, and in fact it did happen to some people I knew. Terrible thing. So we do have to protect people, but we have this fantastic resource in Coldstream. I could find you 15 native speakers of other world languages who could be in the school helping people, young people, get engaged with the global community in a very real and meaningful way, which can't be done because of regulation and red tape and things which are done to protect people. And I'm also very conscious that in a town with over half the population over 60, we have an immense resource of world experience which is not being shared with people of other ages. And I would love to see how we could use this concept to safely engage that, as you said earlier, across the ages connection in the community, so we're all benefiting. And so, you know, we have young folks helping old folks learn how to use computers. We have older people explaining about history and so on, teaching cookery, all kinds of things that could be going on. How do we deal with that issue of safety for all?
Okay, good.